You scroll through endless photos of smiling groups, people clinking glasses, laughing together in perfectly filtered moments. Yet something inside you feels quietly distant. You've noticed it for a while now, that subtle gap between you and the world. While others seem to thrive in constant connection, you find yourself stepping back, observing rather than participating. And sometimes, in the silence of those moments, you wonder what it says about you. Society tells us that friendship is proof of success, that the more people surround you, the more likable, confident, and socially competent you must be. From childhood, we were taught to make friends, to fit in, to measure our worth by how many people like us. Social media turned this into a scoreboard: followers, group photos, likes, tags. Everywhere you look, connection is celebrated. And solitude? It's treated like failure. But what if everything you've been told about friendship is backwards? What if having fewer friends isn't a sign of weakness, but of wisdom? What if solitude isn't a punishment, but proof that you've evolved beyond surface-level living? What if your quiet detachment isn't social inadequacy, but emotional maturity? The Stoic philosophers understood this long before our modern obsession with popularity began. They believed that the strength of a person's soul is measured not by the number of people who know them, but by the quality of the few who truly do. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, surrounded by thousands who sought his favor, yet he trusted only a handful. Seneca wrote that, "It is better to have one friend of great value than many friends of little worth." And Epictetus reminded his students that peace of mind could never be found in crowds, only in the quiet company of one's own thoughts. To the Stoics, solitude was not loneliness, it was alignment. It was the ability to stand firm in a noisy world without needing others to validate your peace. They believed that a man who can be content with few friends, or even with none for a time, has achieved something rare: self-sufficiency. Think about it. How many people can sit in silence without reaching for their phone? How many can go a weekend alone without feeling restless or irrelevant? We've been trained to fear being by ourselves, to confuse stillness with emptiness. But in truth, the ability to stand alone, peacefully, purposefully, is one of the highest forms of strength. So if you've ever felt different because your social circle is small, if you've ever wondered why others seem to bond so easily while you struggle to find genuine connection, pause before you judge yourself. What you see as isolation may actually be evidence of integrity, discernment, and depth. You might not lack friends because you're broken. You might lack friends because you refuse to fake yourself for attention. This journey you're on, the quieter, lonelier path, might not be a flaw in your story. It might be your awakening. In this video, we'll explore 7 profound insights from Stoic philosophy that reveal what having few friends truly means. Each one exposes a deeper layer of wisdom about character, peace, and inner strength. You'll see why the Stoics believed that solitude could be a teacher, and why your ability to stand apart might actually be your greatest asset in a world addicted to noise. Before we dive in, remember, this channel, True Stoic Way, exists to remind you that solitude can be sacred. Subscribe now if you're ready to see loneliness as your greatest teacher. Because the fewer friends you have, the closer you might be to discovering the most important one of all, yourself. Insight number 1, you have high standards for character. Emma used to think something was wrong with her. In college, she watched her roommate, also named Emma, live the life she thought she was supposed to want. Parties every weekend, endless selfies with smiling faces, a calendar filled with social events. The room would light up whenever that Emma walked in. People gravitated toward her like moths to a flame. And yet every time Emma tried to join that world, something inside her quietly resisted. At first, she blamed herself. Maybe I'm too quiet, too serious, too different. But deep down, she knew it wasn't shyness holding her back. It was discomfort. The laughter at those parties sounded rehearsed. The conversations felt shallow, stitched together by gossip and convenience. When the group sat around talking about others behind their backs, something in her recoiled. When they mocked classmates for being weird, she felt a quiet anger rise inside her. It wasn't jealousy. It was clarity. She began to notice patterns. The same people who smiled sweetly to someone's face would twist the knife as soon as that person left. They bragged about cheating on exams, lying to professors, or manipulating people to get ahead. And every time Emma tried to ignore her instincts, her chest tightened. It was as if her conscience was whispering, "You don't belong here." One night, after another exhausting party, she returned to her dorm room, sat by the window, and watched the campus lights flicker in the distance. A quiet realization washed over her. She wasn't antisocial. She was protecting her soul. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Associate with those who make you better." The Stoics believed that who you surround yourself with determines the person you become. Values are contagious. We absorb them through constant exposure, like smoke filling a room. Spend too long around deceit, arrogance, or cruelty, and soon those traits seep into your own behavior. Emma understood this instinctively. She saw how her roommate's circle bonded through gossip, dishonesty, and moral flexibility. To be accepted by them, she would have to compromise pieces of herself, her empathy, her honesty, her respect for others. And that realization frightened her more than being alone ever could. So she made a decision. She stopped forcing conversations that felt false. She declined invitations that drained her energy. Slowly, her social circle shrank. First to a few acquaintances, then to just 2 people who truly saw her. They weren't loud, glamorous, or popular, but with them, Emma could breathe. They listened without judgment, spoke with sincerity, and shared her quiet desire to live with integrity. Her roommate teased her for being too picky. "You'll end up with no one," she said once, laughing. But Emma only smiled. She had discovered something her roommate hadn't, that integrity sometimes demands solitude. There is a kind of loneliness that wounds, born from rejection and fear. But there is another kind, sacred, self-chosen, and powerful, born from refusing to compromise your values for comfort. The Stoics knew this difference well. Seneca wrote that, "One friend of great worth is better than many of little value." They saw friendship not as a numbers game, but as a moral alliance, a shared pursuit of virtue. Emma's solitude wasn't isolation, it was alignment. She wasn't distancing herself from people, she was distancing herself from falsehood. While others collected connections, she was building character. And though her path was quieter, it was also freer. We live in a world that rewards conformity. It's easier to be liked than to be principled, easier to laugh at the wrong joke than to be the one who walks away. But Stoicism reminds us that character is built not in crowds, but in moments of quiet resistance, when you choose respect over popularity, virtue over comfort, and truth over convenience. Marcus Aurelius urged himself daily to stay close only to those who made him better. Not richer, not louder, not more admired, but better. That is the essence of high standards for character. It's not arrogance, it's self-respect. It's the recognition that peace of mind is more valuable than social approval. So if you often find yourself losing interest in people who gossip, manipulate, or lie, don't see that as judgment. See it as discernment. If you'd rather spend time in meaningful silence than empty chatter, that's not social weakness. That's wisdom. Emma didn't end up with many friends, but the few she did have became her anchors, mirrors that reflected her best self back at her. She realized she hadn't been missing out on anything by being selective. She had been saving herself from corrosion. And maybe that's what your solitude means too. It's not that you're hard to befriend. It's that your spirit demands honesty. And the truth is, people like that rarely find large crowds, but they always find peace. If this truth resonates, if you've chosen integrity over popularity, pause and subscribe to True Stoic Way, where we explore strength born from solitude. Because sometimes the smallest circle is the strongest fortress. Insight number 2. You're comfortable with your own company. Jennifer used to think that silence was something to be filled. Whenever her apartment grew too quiet, she would reach for her phone, scroll endlessly, call a friend, or play music just to drown out the emptiness. She thought being alone meant something was wrong, that solitude was a space where happiness went to die. But life has a way of revealing truth when you least expect it. When her boyfriend moved across the country for work, Jennifer suddenly found herself alone for the first time in years. Her friends panicked on her behalf. They filled her messages with invitations, dinners, parties, weekend trips, anything to keep her from feeling lonely. But something unexpected happened. In the hush of her empty apartment, Jennifer didn't feel lonely. She felt free. It started with small moments, mornings when sunlight poured through the blinds and she could hear nothing but the slow rhythm of her own breathing. She made coffee without rush, watched the steam rise, and felt oddly peaceful. One afternoon, she pulled out her old set of paintbrushes, tools she hadn't touched in years. As the first streak of color met the canvas, something inside her awakened. Her hands moved with purpose, her thoughts slowed, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about who might text her back. She was simply there. Days turned into weeks, and Jennifer began to rediscover herself in that quiet. She spent long walks beneath the trees, not with earbuds in, but in conversation with her own mind. She read books that stirred her soul, filled notebooks with thoughts she had never given herself time to feel. Her friends couldn't understand. "Aren't you lonely?" they'd ask. "Don't you miss people?" But she didn't. She missed herself, and she had finally found her again. Epictetus once wrote, "Man is disturbed not by things, but by his view of them." Solitude, like everything else, is neither good nor bad on its own. It becomes suffering only when we believe it means abandonment. The Stoics understood that the fear of being alone is not a fear of silence. It's a fear of facing ourselves. Most people can't stand their own company because in stillness their thoughts get loud. Regrets echo. Insecurities whisper. Doubt begins to surface. So they rush toward distraction, people, noise, screens, anything to avoid meeting the person they truly are. But when you can sit alone without needing constant stimulation, you've crossed into a kind of freedom most will never know. The Stoics practiced solitude not as escape, but as mastery. Marcus Aurelius often retreated into silence to reflect, to write, to observe his own character without judgment. Epictetus taught that true peace doesn't come from what surrounds you. It comes from the clarity within you. They believed that those who can find contentment alone are the only ones capable of genuine connection because they don't seek others to complete them. They seek others to share their completeness. Jennifer's story is a reflection of that truth. She realized that her joy didn't depend on how many people she could talk to in a day, but on how deeply she could talk to herself. She wasn't isolating. She was integrating. Her solitude became a mirror, showing her what truly mattered: creativity, reflection, stillness. And when she did spend time with others again, she noticed something had changed. She no longer needed to impress or entertain. She could simply be. That quiet confidence drew people to her naturally. The kind of calm that comes from someone who has met themselves and is no longer afraid of what they find. To be comfortable with your own company is not rejection of the world, it's harmony with it. You stop chasing validation, stop fearing silence. You begin to realize that the world outside is only as peaceful as the one within. So if you can sit in a room alone, without reaching for your phone, without needing someone to distract you, you're already more powerful than most. Because you've discovered what the Stoics called autarkia, the state of being self-sufficient, whole, and free. Jennifer didn't gain followers. She didn't expand her social circle, but she gained something infinitely rarer: herself. And that kind of companionship never leaves you. Insight number 3. You understand the true cost of relationships. Lisa didn't realize how exhausted she was until one night, sitting in the back of a noisy cafe, she felt a strange emptiness behind her smile. She had just come from another friend's birthday dinner, one of 3 that week. Her phone buzzed endlessly with group chats, updates, and invitations. Everyone seemed to want a piece of her attention. On the surface, she was thriving, well-liked, always included, never alone. But deep inside, she was drained. Not from lack of sleep, but from lack of meaning. She used to believe that being a good friend meant saying yes to everything. Coffee meetups, party invites, long text threads filled with small talk. But somewhere along the way, she stopped recognizing herself. The constant social activity had turned into a performance, a never-ending cycle of showing up, smiling, and pretending she had energy left to give. One evening, after scrolling through yet another flood of messages, she realized something startling. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a real conversation, one where she felt seen, understood, or even present. Her life was overflowing with people, but her heart was starving for connection. That night, she didn't go out. She turned off her phone, made a cup of tea, and sat in silence. The stillness felt awkward at first, unfamiliar, almost guilty. But as the quiet deepened, so did her clarity. She began to see her friendships for what they were, some beautiful, some transactional, and many built on convenience rather than care. The Stoics would have recognized that feeling instantly. Marcus Aurelius warned against scattering our energy too widely, reminding himself, "Don't waste your energy on what doesn't strengthen your soul." To them, relationships were not obligations. They were sacred exchanges of virtue, built on mutual growth and understanding. Every interaction either nourishes or depletes your spirit, and wisdom lies in knowing which is which. Lisa realized she had been living on emotional credit, overextending herself to maintain shallow bonds. She mistook constant contact for closeness and attention for affection. But friendship, the Stoics taught, should not cost you your peace. Seneca compared it to wealth. Spend only what you can afford to lose without debt to your soul. This is the essence of emotional economy, knowing where your energy goes and whether the return is growth or emptiness. So Lisa began to simplify. She started saying no, gently but firmly. No to events that left her drained. No to conversations that went nowhere. No to relationships that depended on her constant availability but never offered depth in return. In their place, she invested her time in 3 friendships that truly mattered. She stopped showing up everywhere and started showing up fully somewhere. The result was immediate. The exhaustion faded. Her calendar looked emptier, but her heart felt lighter. The evenings once filled with noise became moments of reflection, peace, and genuine connection. When she met her closest friends, their time together felt rich. No pretending, no performance, just presence. In modern life, this kind of selectivity is rare. We are constantly told to network, connect, and stay socially active. But the truth is, our emotional bandwidth is finite. Every message, every meetup, every interaction costs something. Your time, your attention, your energy. And when those resources are spent on the wrong people, there's nothing left for the ones who truly matter, including yourself. Those who have few friends often aren't lacking social skills. They've simply learned the art of investment. They understand that true friendship demands energy, empathy, and emotional availability. Things too precious to give freely to everyone. They know that spreading yourself thin leaves you spiritually malnourished. So if you found yourself tired from trying to please everyone, remember this. Peace is the interest earned on wisely invested energy. The fewer people you try to keep up with, the deeper you can go with those who truly deserve you. Here at True Stoic Way, we talk about this kind of selective energy. Subscribe if you're learning to protect your peace by choosing depth over distraction. Because wisdom isn't in having many friends, it's in knowing who deserves your light. Insight number 4, you value authenticity over social performance. David never hated his job, not really. He was good at it. He was respected, even liked. But every day as he walked through the glass doors of his marketing firm, he could feel his shoulders tense slightly, as if he were stepping into costume. The office thrived on energy, loud voices, exaggerated laughter, constant competition to be the most magnetic in the room. Meetings weren't just meetings, they were performances. Everywhere he looked, people were on. They exaggerated stories to sound more impressive, cracked jokes even when they didn't feel like laughing, and performed enthusiasm like it was part of their job description. Success wasn't measured by the quality of ideas, but by how confidently they were sold. And while others seemed to thrive in this atmosphere, David found himself slowly suffocating beneath the noise. He wasn't shy. He wasn't bitter. He was simply tired. Tired of pretending to be more outgoing than he was. Tired of exaggerating excitement he didn't feel. Tired of smiling when his soul just wanted silence. He tried to fit in at first, stayed late at happy hours, forced laughter at stories he didn't find funny, nodded along during endless conversations about who was being promoted or praised. But after each event, he came home feeling hollow, like he had left his real self somewhere outside the building. One night, sitting in his car after another exhausting team bonding event, he didn't turn the engine on. He just sat there, staring at his reflection in the dark window. The version of himself who had just been performing all evening, energetic, agreeable, charismatic, looked like a stranger. Beneath that mask was someone quiet, thoughtful, observant, and deeply human. And he missed that person. That night, he made a quiet promise. No more pretending. The next day, David stopped forcing conversations. He began to speak only when he had something meaningful to say. When asked his opinion, he gave it honestly, not harshly, but without sugarcoating it for approval. He skipped unnecessary gatherings and replaced them with small lunches or coffee breaks with people he genuinely liked. At first, some coworkers noticed the shift. "You okay?" they'd ask. "You've been quieter lately." He'd smile gently and reply, "Yeah, just being myself." And for the first time in years, that answer felt right. The Stoics called this living according to your nature, an alignment between who you are inside and how you show up in the world. Marcus Aurelius wrote that every being has its proper nature. A tree grows upright, a river flows downward, and a person's nature is to live with honesty and reason. To distort that, to pretend to be what you're not, is to betray yourself. Seneca once warned, "One who seeks approval loses freedom." And David understood this now more deeply than ever. The constant performance he'd been living was a form of quiet slavery, a dependency on others' perception to define his worth. But when he dropped the act, he found something unexpected. Peace. The modern world often rewards performance over authenticity. Social media thrives on it, filters, personas, highlight reels. Even in real life, many of us wear invisible masks to survive in environments that prize charm over character. We shape ourselves to fit expectations, terrified that our real self might be too quiet, too serious, or too different. But Stoicism teaches that you lose yourself the moment you start living for applause. When you stop performing, you may lose a few admirers, but you gain yourself back. And that's a trade no wise person regrets. David's circle became smaller, but the air around him felt lighter. Conversations grew slower, more meaningful. People who stayed in his life no longer needed him to entertain them. They valued his steadiness, his quiet humor, his genuine presence. And those who left, he let them. Not with bitterness, but with gratitude for the space they left behind. He no longer needed to be the loudest voice in the room to feel valuable. He no longer chased approval to feel seen. He had learned the truth the Stoics lived by, that authenticity, though less glamorous, leads to a richer peace. Choosing honesty over performance is rarely celebrated. It doesn't earn applause. It earns alignment, the quiet confidence that comes from living as one whole person instead of fragments of who others expect you to be. And in that quiet truth lies the real victory. Because while the world rewards those who shine in crowds, the Stoics remind us that real strength belongs to those who can be sincere in solitude. Choosing to be real instead of impressive will not make you popular, but it will make you free. And that freedom, in a world obsessed with pretending, is the ultimate mark of wisdom. Insight number 5, you prioritize inner peace over social drama. There was a time when Rachel thought constant excitement meant a full life. Her weekends were a blur of plans, dinners, parties, group chats, and spontaneous hangouts that always seemed to end with someone crying, arguing, or gossiping. The emotional highs were intoxicating, the lows quietly devastating. There was always some new tension, some whispered betrayal, some never-ending cycle of apologies and drama that promised connection, but only delivered exhaustion. She mistook chaos for closeness. The intensity of those friendships made her feel important, like she mattered. But slowly, she began to notice the cost. Every time she left a gathering, she felt emotionally depleted. She spent more time listening to others complain than speaking her own truth. She was always fixing, mediating, helping. But when she needed support, the room fell silent. One night, After another argument in her friend group that spun out of control, Rachel came home and sat in the dark. Her phone kept lighting up with notifications, long texts filled with blame, apologies, and accusations. She stared at the screen until the glow blurred her vision, then turned it face down. For the first time, she didn't reply. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was peaceful. That single act, choosing silence over reaction, marked the beginning of her transformation. The Stoics called this state ataraxia, inner tranquility, a calm that remains unshaken by the noise of the outside world. To them, peace was not the absence of problems, but the mastery of response. They taught that you cannot control the storms of others, only whether you step into them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Rachel began to test that idea in small ways. When gossip started, she quietly changed the subject. When friends argued, she refused to take sides. When negativity filled her group chats, she muted them instead of replying. Each time she chose calm over chaos, her mind grew lighter. She discovered that protecting peace wasn't selfish, it was sacred. But peace in the modern world is a rebellion. Today, drama is entertainment. Social media trains us to crave outrage, to feed on conflict and comparison. Every scroll exposes us to someone else's argument, heartbreak, or highlight reel. The world screams for our attention, and our nervous systems pay the price. Stoicism is the antidote. It teaches that peace is not found by escaping life, but by managing what you let in. Rachel started curating her environment the way the Stoics curated their minds. She unfollowed accounts that fed her anxiety, stepped back from people who thrived on crisis, and replaced endless debates with quiet evenings of journaling or walks at sunset. It wasn't glamorous. It was healing. Of course, her old friends noticed. "You've changed," they said. "You're so quiet lately." But Rachel smiled. "I'm not quiet," she thought. "I'm just done arguing for peace with people who prefer noise." Every time you say no to gossip, you're saying yes to peace. Every time you walk away from unnecessary conflict, you reclaim the energy you once gave to chaos. The Stoics believed this restraint was not weakness, but strength, the power to govern one's emotions, to stay grounded in virtue rather than pulled by the turbulence of others. Rachel's world became smaller, but her soul grew steadier. She no longer woke up anxious, replaying last night's drama. She no longer needed to fix everyone else's problems. Her mind, once crowded with noise, now had space for clarity, purpose, and joy. And that's the paradox of peace. Once you taste it, you realize how expensive the noise truly was. If you too have begun choosing silence over chaos, kindness over argument, solitude over drama, you're walking the same path the Stoics did. Comment, "I choose peace" below to remind others that serenity isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Because at the end of the day, the calmest voice in the room is always the strongest. Insight number 6, you don't need external validation. When Maria first moved to a new city, she thought loneliness was the enemy. Her small apartment felt like a hollow shell. Walls too white, nights too quiet, silence too heavy. She missed the noise of her old life. The constant chatter, the notifications, the illusion of being seen. So she did what most people do when they fear invisibility. She filled the void. She joined every social group she could find, networking clubs, yoga classes, weekend brunches. She said yes to every invitation, even when she wanted to say no. Her calendar was full, but her heart wasn't. Every new face brought a brief spark of connection that faded as soon as the conversations ended. Beneath the noise, she still felt unseen. One night, after another exhausting evening of smiling and small talk, she came home and dropped her keys on the counter. The sound echoed through the empty room. For a moment, she just stood there, motionless, realizing that she had spent weeks trying to prove she was okay, rather than actually being okay. That night, she didn't turn on the TV. She didn't scroll her phone. She simply sat on the floor, surrounded by the hum of her own breathing, and whispered something that felt both terrifying and true. "I don't need anyone to see me for me to exist." That moment marked the beginning of her quiet revolution. Instead of chasing connection, Maria began chasing alignment. Each morning she asked herself not, "Who do I need to impress today?" but "Who do I need to become today?" She stopped trying to fill her time and started filling her soul. She began journaling, cooking for herself, taking long walks with no destination, learning to enjoy the company of the one person who would never leave, herself. As her inner life deepened, her outer world grew calmer. She noticed that her anxiety about being liked started to fade. When someone didn't text her back, it no longer unraveled her peace. When an invitation didn't come, she didn't take it personally. The emptiness that once felt unbearable now felt sacred, a space where her own thoughts could finally breathe. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion." He saw what still traps most of us today: the absurdity of valuing the judgment of others above the voice of our own conscience. We spend our lives trying to appear valuable in the eyes of strangers while neglecting to be valuable in truth. The Stoics called this self-approval, the practice of measuring your worth not by applause, but by alignment with virtue. To them, true confidence is not loud. It's quiet, rooted in integrity rather than popularity. It's the ability to look in the mirror and know that even if the world never claps for you, you are still whole. Maria started building her days around that principle. She worked toward her goals not for praise but for growth. She made decisions based on what felt right, not what looked impressive. The more she lived in harmony with her own values, the freer she felt. Something interesting began to happen. People started noticing her confidence, but not because she was trying to show it. It radiated from her stillness. She no longer needed to prove herself, and that quiet assurance drew others toward her naturally. When you stop needing validation, your presence changes. You stop performing. You stop chasing approval. You begin to move through the world with a calm certainty that others can feel but rarely understand. You no longer need to convince anyone that you're enough, because you know you are. The Stoics believed this kind of independence is the foundation of peace. When your worth comes from your principles rather than opinions, you become untouchable. No rejection can diminish you, no criticism can shake you, and no silence can make you question your value. Maria's apartment didn't feel empty anymore. The same four walls that once echoed with loneliness now held the sound of her quiet freedom. She realized she didn't move to the city to find people. She moved there to find herself. So if you've ever walked away from a crowd and felt stronger for it, you've already won. Because the moment you stop needing others to tell you who you are, you finally meet the person you were meant to be. Insight number 7, you recognize that quality always trumps quantity. Elena had always been the social one. Her calendar was always full. Coffee meetups, study groups, birthday dinners, and weekend getaways. She had friends in every circle, people she could call for any occasion. From the outside, her life looked vibrant, enviable even. Yet somewhere beneath the surface, she felt a quiet disconnection she couldn't name. When her father was diagnosed with cancer, that disconnection became impossible to ignore. In the days following the diagnosis, her phone buzzed constantly. Messages from friends sending well-meaning emojis, offers for distractions, or casual thinking of you notes. But when the nights grew long and fear pressed heavy on her chest, those same friends were silent. The people she had spent years laughing with suddenly didn't know what to say. The ones who filled her weekends with noise vanished when life demanded silence, patience, and presence. One evening, after another lonely hospital visit, Elena sat in her car and watched the rain blur the windshield. Her thoughts raced. How can I have so many friends and still feel completely alone? The truth hit her gently but deeply. She had been surrounded by people but not connected to them. Her social world had been built on convenience, not depth. That night, she decided to stop chasing numbers. She stopped replying to every message, stopped forcing friendships that existed only to fill time. Instead, she reached out to 3 people who had shown quiet consistency. Those who didn't just show up when life was easy, but when it was hard. They didn't always have the right words, but they had presence. They listened, they cared. Those 3 friends became her sanctuary. When her father's condition worsened, they sat beside her in silence, brought her food without asking, and stayed late just to make sure she wasn't alone. There was no drama, no performative concern, only genuine connection. In their company, Elena felt something she hadn't in years: peace. The Stoics would have called this virtue in practice. They believed that quality always outweighs quantity, in relationships, in knowledge, in life itself. Seneca wrote, "It is not how many books you have, but how good they are, that matters." The same principle applies to people. 1,000 acquaintances may fill your schedule, but one honest friend can fill your soul. Marcus Aurelius lived this truth as Emperor of Rome. Surrounded by power, flattery, and endless company, he still chose solitude and a select few companions of integrity. He understood that too many voices dilute wisdom, that the company of the wise is worth more than the crowd of the popular. In our modern world, this wisdom feels revolutionary. We live in an era of followers instead of friends, connections instead of companionship. People measure worth in numbers, likes, views, circles, forgetting that abundance without substance leads to emptiness. We chase more recognition, more attention, more noise. But the Stoic path reminds us that less, when chosen well, is infinitely more nourishing. Think about it. Would you rather have 100 people who forget your name in a month, or one person who remembers your silence without needing explanation? Would you rather read 1,000 posts that entertain you briefly, or one page of wisdom that changes how you live? The Stoics extended this philosophy to every part of existence. They believed that mastery, in thought, work, or relationships, comes not from touching many things superficially, but from engaging a few things deeply. One true friendship, one calling, one discipline practiced with integrity. These shape the soul far more than endless variety. Elena began applying this idea everywhere. She simplified her schedule, focused on meaningful work instead of busy tasks, and gave her energy to people who made her better. Her days became quieter, but richer. The space once filled by countless shallow connections now held peace, gratitude, and focus. When her father passed, those same 3 friends stood beside her, steady, silent, unwavering. And in that moment, Elena realized something profound. Love measured by depth will always outlast affection measured by volume. She no longer envied people with large social circles. She pitied them a little, not with arrogance but with empathy, because she knew the emptiness that comes from confusing presence with meaning. Stoicism teaches us that depth, in relationships, in wisdom, in purpose, is the foundation of fulfillment. It reminds us that one genuine connection nourishes the soul more than 1,000 empty interactions. So if your world feels small but honest, if your circle could fit around a single dinner table, know that you are already living the Stoic truth. You haven't lost connection, you've refined it. Because a life measured by quality will always outshine one defined by quantity. As we've journeyed through these 7 insights, a quiet truth has emerged, one that runs deeper than friendship, deeper than loneliness itself. What if having fewer friends has never been a weakness, but a reflection of who you're becoming? Each insight reveals a piece of a greater transformation, a map of what it means to evolve inwardly in a world obsessed with the external. You learned first that having high standards for character is not arrogance, it's integrity. You've chosen to walk away from those who drain your spirit, rather than betray your values for belonging. That's not isolation, that's self-respect. Then, you discovered the beauty of your own company. Like Jennifer, you realized that silence isn't empty, it's full of yourself, your thoughts, your dreams, your rediscovered creativity. You've learned that peace comes not from the crowd, but from the stillness you cultivate within. Through Lisa's lesson, you understood the true cost of relationships, that your emotional energy is precious currency, meant to be invested wisely, not spent recklessly. Depth, not breadth, is the mark of the wise. David's story reminded you that authenticity will always be heavier than performance, but infinitely more freeing. To live according to your nature, to drop the mask and just be, is a quiet act of rebellion in a world addicted to pretending. Then came Rachel, who showed that peace is a choice, a daily act of protecting your mind from unnecessary noise. Every time you say no to gossip, no to chaos, no to conflict that leads nowhere, You're saying yes to your soul. You've learned that tranquility is not found in escape, but in discernment. From Maria, you saw that you don't need external validation to feel worthy. You've learned that true confidence is silent, rooted in virtue, not applause. When you no longer need the world's approval to feel complete, you become unshakable. And finally, through Elena, you discovered that quality always trumps quantity, in friendship, in work, in life. One true connection nourishes the soul more than 1,000 hollow interactions. Real wealth is measured not by how many people know your name, but by how many truly know your heart. All these lessons, character, solitude, selectivity, authenticity, peace, self-worth, and depth, converge into a single Stoic truth. Solitude isn't the absence of connection, it's the presence of self. To the Stoics, being alone was never something to fear. It was the sacred ground where the soul grows roots. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person at peace with themselves is never truly alone, for they carry their own companionship wherever they go. Seneca taught that we should not run from solitude but shape it, use it as a mirror to see our true reflection, unfiltered by the opinions of others. If you have walked through seasons of loneliness, understand this. You weren't being punished, you were being refined. Every person who left made room for authenticity. Every silence taught you self-trust. Every moment of solitude carved space for wisdom to take root. Perhaps this is the secret the Stoics knew all along. When you stop chasing crowds, you begin to meet your soul. When you stop performing for love, you begin to attract what's real. When you stop needing validation, you begin to live with purpose. You may not have many people walking beside you right now, but you are not walking in darkness. You are walking toward clarity, toward a quieter, truer version of yourself. And one day, you'll look back on this solitude not as an empty stretch, but as the chapter where you finally met peace. If these truths resonate with you, don't walk this path alone. Join us at True Stoic Way, a community for those who choose depth over noise, purpose over popularity, and wisdom over comfort. Subscribe, reflect, and rise with us, because the journey to becoming unshakable begins the moment you learn to stand alone and love it.